Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. It is Sunday evening and I'm recording a little Veterans Day special. So, this will be dropping maybe at midnight, maybe in the morning. Anywho, happy Veterans Day to every veteran out there. That includes myself and the gentleman I'm a caregiver for, Mr. Buckingham, or as we like to call him, Buck. Oh, you can see my mic flashing a little in and out there. Pull up a little closer. There we go. All right. So, welcome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the support. I'm actually talking at a normal level today because it is 7 p.m. My wife is here. She's having dinner with Buck. And therefore, I have a little, you might hear some yelling in the background, my daughter yelling for my wife. But besides, the point is I can actually talk at a normal rate. I'm not trying to keep it quiet because nobody's asleep and everyone is out of the house. So super stoked about that. Like I said, you're hearing this. It is November 11th. That is Veterans Day. Shout out to all the veterans, everyone who raised their right hand and said, I do. Guess you could say. I solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Something like that. But yeah, shout out to everybody who raised their hand for whatever reason. Everybody's got their reasons. Some people do it for college. It's probably the hardest college money you'll ever earn, maybe for some. But I joined in the 90s, the mid 90s. And I would say maybe the people in the 80s and 90s, for sure. You know, there was no war going on. I was in high school when Desert Storm kicked off. And it was kind of the last conflict we'd really had was Vietnam. And so I grew up on, Vietnam books for, what was it? Man, there was one I used to read about a Navy corpsman who was assigned to Force Recon. That was one of my favorite books for sure. But yeah, shout out to everyone who gave it a whirl and had the most fun you kind of never want to have again. It's very interesting, the military. Um, I loved it. Most of it. There were parts I did not like, as I'm sure most of you can attest to. The whole hurry up and wait, uh, the politics of some of it. But there was a lot of great stuff. The fact that well, you should be staying physically fit for the job and you're tested on it every year. I think that's big, but of course you're gonna see some chiefs out there with guts and whatnot, and um, they can't run anymore, so they choose to swim because they're too fat, which is a pity. But yeah, having to stay physically fit for your job, knowing exactly what you need to do to reach the next rank. I love that because I've just started to realize that on my own journey, with the business coaching I do, my coach is a engineer and he reverse engineers your goals. And I think I heard it explained the other day, kind of in an analogous form, was that one great thing about the military was, hey, you know what you need to do to reach the next rank, how many years it's going to take, how much time and grade you need, what courses you're going to complete, what leadership courses you're going to have to take, what kind of scores you need for your PT test, because they factor all that in. I do enjoy that. I think it's nice that they factor in your physical capability with your role and your promotion to make sure they have the best overall fit. Not somebody who's just killing it in their career, but somebody who's also killing it, um, let's say, kind of in a personal side of life. Although, you know, it is something you need in the military, especially if you're a grunt or you're doing hard shit for a job. I was an admin clerk, so I didn't have to do anything hard. Rarely, I mean, maybe toting cruise boxes when you're getting ready to go to the boat. Oh, I got an itchy ear here. But, for a lot of people, you do need to stay physically fit, especially if you're a grunt, if you're in the infantry or anything like that. But I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed kind of having everything laid out. Hey, this is what you need to do to get where you want to get. Um, and I never really realized that that was kind of one of the appealing things whenever I joined. And it wasn't until recently, because I think if you've heard any of my other episodes, I've really clicked with this point of, Matt O'Neill from the Good Mood Revolution, Good Mood Matt, telling me that, some of the bad things that happen to you, some of the misfortunes you have, some of the mishaps, maybe even in your character, even stepping out of alignment. These are part of the curriculum in order to make you into the person that you want to be. How do I know who I am and what I'm about? Well, because I made enough mistakes to know what I'm not about. So, and now I'm here to hopefully share with all you guys so hopefully you don't make the same mistakes I did or any of the people I've interviewed. And also just understanding that you're not alone. Somebody's made the mistake, they've been forgiven, they've overcome it, and they have moved on with their life, and so should you. You can recover from it, no matter what you think. A little ASMR, some sonic ice there. Anyway, back to Veterans Day. Most of my podcasts have been a mixture of interviews and the Caregiving Chronicles, which are on Saturdays and kind of Mondays. With my last interview dropping, I think 2 weeks ago, this past week, I started telling my story. I'll probably do that in 10-year gaps, roughly, uh, till we get to almost where I'm at, age 50, 48. And who knows after that? I have all kinds of things coming up, with wanting to start accountability coaching. I'm getting ready to coach some people for free and then starting a business for it, in which I am in the process of nailing down a name so I can build a website, which I'm learning to do. And who knows if the podcast will resemble that, if those two things will be linked, if they will be different, or if this podcast will go away and become something else, whatever the accountability coaching program is going to be called. I don't know. Not really concerned about it either. I'll know when the time comes. But for now, let's talk about Veterans Day, as opposed to any lessons learned, anything like that. So, yeah, I'm a veteran, and I am a live-in caregiver for a 97-year-old veteran. We'll talk a little bit about him. Winfred Buckingham. He was born in 1927, and he's actually born on 9/11, which would later become a less than popular date, as we all know. A day to remember, where many people lost their lives, and thus began the beginning of a 20-year war that impacted a lot of lives. So, I know exactly where I was on 9/11. Do you? It was a Tuesday. I had recently moved back from Florida. Yeah, that was probably more like April. But I was living with my buddy Andrew, the person who designed the logo behind me. And Tuesday was my day off. It was his day off. We shared this loft apartment. And I can remember him saying, "Hey, man, he was downstairs. I was still in the loft, kind of laying down, half awake, half asleep. He's like, some planes just crashed into the World Trade Center, and I didn't really even know what that was. So I was like, okay, I'll figure out what that's all about later. Maybe it was a Cessna, something, yada, yada, yada. And then I don't know how long it was after. I'm sure somebody knows, and there's timestamps out there, but not very long after that, he's like, hey, a plane just crashed into the Pentagon. And I was like, oh shit. Now I've been there. I know what that is. So I'm like, this must be fucking serious. And I got up, walked downstairs, and that was 9/11. We proceeded to watch the news, I'm sure, like everyone else did. Later on that day, we ended up, I think, driving near the Houston area. We were kind of concerned because nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what the threat was, what was happening. But, living near Houston at that time, it being a major energy source in terms of oil, shipping, all that kind of stuff, it was like, oh, who knows what's going to happen here. And so that was kind of a concern. And then I guess, I don't know if I really had a concern, but the other part of that story, as I itch my back here, was that I still had 6 months of inactive reserve time left where they could have called me back. And they didn't. I ended up starting college shortly after that, probably the next semester. That was, yeah, September. I got real sick in October, November, moved from that area back near home. And oh, yeah, I started working in the emergency room and then started. Did I go back to college? Yeah. Shortly after, never got called back, but a guy I was in class with got called back. He was a medic, Dustin. He's now a doctor. Forget his last name, but yeah, he went to UT Tyler with me. He's dating Rachel. Maybe they got married. I don't know. But he was a hospital corpsman and he actually got called back. I was a yeoman. I did not get called back. And I'm surprised because, it is a non combat role, but yeomen make the paperwork go around, and everywhere, everyone, everything needs paperwork or has paperwork attached to it. So I was kind of surprised they didn't call me back. But enough about me. We'll switch back. Let's move on to Mr. Buckingham. So yeah, born in 1927. He went to the Naval Academy. He told me the story. I got accepted to the Naval Academy, but I couldn't get a nomination from a senator or congressman, whatever you need. Being half Latino, my mom moving from San Antonio and kind of being immersed into the English speaking assimilation, white people town. We didn't know a lot of people. We didn't know any senators. We weren't of any prominence. My parents weren't notable people within the town who knew anyone who could get me a nomination. So I did not get to go, unlike Buck, who did get to go to the Naval Academy. And so, of course, I naturally asked him, well, how did you get your nomination and whatnot? And he proceeded to tell me, I think I'd mentioned in a few other podcasts that he grew up in a super democratic household. His parents were part of like the Democratic Party things, I guess, where they hold meetings and whatnot. They were also part of the school board and this and that, the other. But I believe he said that during one of the elections, his mother had worked for a governor, congressman, senator, or on behalf thereof, knocking and talking for votes and whatnot. And maybe he won. And so when it came time for Mr. Buck to get his nomination, she hit up that person. And he was able to get that. And he ended up at the Naval Academy. And while we haven't discussed that a ton. Um, he's told me little bits. I know he met his wife there. She's from that area, who's since passed, of course. But yeah, he probably, see if he was born in 27, maybe he went there in 44 or 45. It was like right after VEG, VE Day, and maybe it was in between VE and VJ Day, I want to say. Something like that. But he ended up going in this window. So he was kind of too young, maybe at the time, like he couldn't enlist or he didn't enlist. I can't remember the whole story. One day we'll get it. But for the purpose of this episode, I know he ended up going there. And then, so that would have probably got him out in 48, somewhere around there, 47, 1948. I cannot remember exactly what was going on at that time, but he got out of the Naval Academy, and I cannot remember if his first station was like San Diego or Norfolk or wherever, but I know he spent quite a bit of time in San Diego. He spent quite a bit of time in San Francisco when they were building ships there. I know he was in Norfolk. He was also in South Carolina briefly and in Washington, which maybe I can tell you a little bit about that, although it was very brief, he said. But Buck was a naval architect. That's what his master's is in. I cannot remember what his undergrad is in, but I'm sure it was some sort of engineering. But the Naval Academy is going to be heavy on that anyway, regardless if you're doing political science or whatever degrees they offer. I know from having a full ROTC scholarship that it is required you take certain maths and physics, or physics 1 and 2 with calculus and all the maths, so that you have that engineering background. But I know primarily he spent a lot of time building ships. Um, and then he did some other things, but I know like most of what I remember because we have these conversations. It's some of my favorite time when we're able to talk about history and different things. And of course, with the elections going on, there's been a lot of that. Oh, yeah, that reminds me. Um, but yeah, he did a lot of interesting things. He was in San Francisco probably in its heyday when they had shipbuilding there, San Diego. Oh, he told me, where was it? Chula Vista he lived. So any of you guys out there familiar with that? They built a 5-bedroom house in Chula Vista, and at that time, it had to have been the 50s. He paid like $23,000 for it. Yeah, crazy. Imagine what that is worth now. Yeah, mind blowing how much things have changed. But I know he spent a lot of time as a naval architect, and he ended up going to grad school, um, I believe, for that. But I know the Navy also has, I don't know if they did back then, but now a lot of people go to DC or like, it's kind of like the Naval Warfare College or something, War College. What do they call it? You go there and you learn all about that. But a friend of mine did that, Daniel Broadhurst, commander. Daniel Broadhurst, same rank as Buck. Um, Daniel, shout out to Dan, Lieutenant Dan. He was Yeah, we were in ROTC together, University of Florida, and I left and he stayed in and ended up becoming a SWO daddy, surface warfare officer, doing all of his tours and ended up being the commanding officer of a destroyer, I believe, and retiring. Yeah, I could be retired like him. Man, only my mouth and my thoughts. Yeah, here I am. Yeah, lots to think about. I could have retired at 37 because I joined at 17. But anyway, Buck was doing that. And, I know he did some time in Washington. He didn't like it very much. And these are where some of these names might come into play. A lot of you might not know them, but, um, he said his job in Washington was to go around kind of and see where they could cut budgets or different programs. And he went to Admiral Rickover, who is the founder of the nuclear program in the Navy, and he'd gone to graduate school with Admiral Rickover, although they weren't admirals at the time. They were around the same rank. And of course, he's like, no, you can't cut the nuke program. Not even the president can do that. He went to some other ones that were weapons oriented, and that couldn't be cut either. And so he realized kind of it was one of these things of everyone he went to was like, no, nobody can cut my program. Nobody can take my money. We got to have it because anyone who does budgeting knows once you give up your budget, you're never going to get it back, whether it's position, whether it's money. So a lot of people will find things to spend the money on just so they get the next budget next year. Doesn't make it right. That's just what it is. Works the same way in healthcare as I'm sure it does the Navy and every other kind of business as it relates to FTEs and budgets. But he did not like that everybody said no, nobody kind of wanted to work with it. Therefore, he asked if he could be relieved from Washington, and I believe he was. And on account of that, I think the military will try to, when you don't agree with them or you want to do something different than what they have planned for you to do, they get their panties in a bunch and kind of want to give you a shit station or shit duty, or at least in my experience, that's what happened to me. And I'll discuss that probably in my life story. I'll go more into detail about my experience in the Navy on those days. But, he ended up, I think that's when he went to South Carolina to become part of, you know, I think they had minesweepers or something there at that time. But as luck would have it, he, I mean, he ended up, well, let's backtrack a little bit. He had built a ship, I know that, and they were getting ready to launch it. And once that ship was complete, they gave him orders to go to a different carrier and then was going to give the ship he built to someone else, to a different engineer and whatnot. And I believe he was like, well, that's pretty fucking dumb. Probably not what he would say because I've never heard a cuss word come out of his mouth. But maybe at that time he swore like a sailor and said, that's fucking stupid. Why would you not give the engineering department of the boat to the person who built the thing? And it only makes sense. But of course, the government and all its wisdom does not make sense. And yeah, they wanted to do that. And I don't know what strings he had to pull or what he had to do, but he got it worked out and he ended up on that boat um, as the chief engineer or whatever you call it, engineering officer. So I know that was kind of one of his things. So kind of, fast forward to DC, he doesn't like it. And they're like, well, okay, we're going to send you to South Carolina. But, given this experience that he had with building ships, engineering, chief engineer or engineering officer, whatever you want to call it, something else came around. I believe it was, maybe it was Vietnam. And um, I believe the Kitty Hawk needed an engineering officer, and they sent him. He got orders because they needed somebody who was tip top for that. And he ended up there, and he was telling me about, they had some issues with some parts that were like the Navy, whoever manufactured the parts was too slow, behind, something like that. The Navy couldn't keep them in stock, and they were going to be needing all this. And he kind of like had this foresight and found somebody to engineer these parts and ended up with extra. And, during this time, it really made a huge difference, I guess, in terms of um, what some of the ships and other boats in the fleet could do, just because he kind of had that foresight and had the extra parts and or had access to them or access to having them machined on demand back in that day. So that was a big deal. But I know that was kind of one of his things, and kind of the relation there was he was on the Kitty Hawk at that time. I was not on the Kitty Hawk. I was on the Independence, but the Kitty Hawk replaced the Independence, I think in 96 or 97 when I left Japan. So yeah, CV-62 and CV-63. So we're kind of kindred spirits in that. They were the smallest carriers, the oldest carriers. But yeah, he's also had some interesting little fun facts, like telling me how I guess the Valley Forge might have been a destroyer, the USS Valley Forge, and they turned it into a carrier, but it had a different hull, like a battleship hull, carrier top. Um, I guess because that was the direction that they saw things going. But yeah, we haven't overly talked about his military experience, but those are kind of some of the highlights of it. And he ended up retiring as an '05. I do not know what his last duty station was. But yeah, he did many different things. He went to school, was classmates with Admiral Rickover. So any of you Navy nukes or people who know the name, I was like, holy cow, because I was in the nuke program. I knew that name. I was like, yeah, he just knew him. And then, one night my wife and I are in there getting them ready for bed, and we were talking about something, and we're trying to figure out who was running in the years before when it was against Obama, and then the first time Trump ran, and I feel like maybe I said John McCain, and that proceeded into a little nugget of, oh, he knew John McCain too. They were on the same carrier, I guess, when he was like one of the engineering officers or something. John McCain was a squadron commander or something like that. So, yeah, it's wild. Kind of some who's who's of Navy people. Although I still get a crack out of I almost said Dr. Trump, Donald Trump. As my daughter used to call him Donald Trunk. Uh, saying, well, John McCain, he wasn't very good because he got caught because he was a prisoner of war for all those years. Yeah, yeah, pretty wild that he knew all those people. Yeah, some of the people I served with. I don't know if you're listening. If you are, what's up? There's Daniel Broadhurst, Sean Suter, USMC, Alex, or maybe Juan Pereira, who went to YNA school from Miami, Chris from Illinois. I don't know your last name, but he, Juan, and I used to go to New Orleans and stuff together. Uh, man, Roy from Kansas. He was over in Japan. Got Manny Manessis and Larry Layog of the VAQ 136. Who else? Oh, Chris from Tampa. Cannot remember his last name, but we met on TAD. Yeah, some cool people. Fun times. They say never again volunteer yourself. The most fun you never want to have again. But yeah, my experience was great. I graduated high school a year early, which I'll go over in my story. Joined the Navy at 17. Um, got a full scholarship. Had my birthday in Japan, my 19th birthday. Got a full scholarship and accelerated advanced promotion to E4 from graduating top of my class in A school. I got that within 6 months of arriving to Japan, and then yeah, I got my full scholarship, the promotion, and had my birthday all in the same week. So yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I was on CV-62, part of Squadron VAQ 136, which are AE-6B Electronic Warfare Fighting Squadron, and I was a black shoe or a yeoman, meaning I did not participate in any of the Airedale stuff, bod walk downs every once in a while, because the Master Chief of the squadron would kind of recommend it. But you know, the great thing when you're a black shoe is when it's cold outside, you're inside. When it's hot outside, you're inside. You're always clean. You're not a grease monkey, but you're around the CO, XO, all the officers, the Master Chief of the squadron. So you have to um, always have your shit in order. You want your shoes shined. You want creases where they need to be, buckle shine, hair done. Um, yeah, it was enjoyable for me. Got to go to Hong Kong, Thailand. Did miss Australia and Hawaii though, because I got a scholarship back, and ended up dropping the scholarship after a year. It was during the Clinton years, and there's other people who dropped it. I know some of them had to go back to the fleet. I did not, so it kind of worked out. But yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of great times, a lot of great people. I think, part of me almost thinks that mandatory 2-year service should be required for everyone. Give you a real appreciation for what it takes to sacrifice to a bigger picture, bigger idea than yourself. Plus, you get to see a lot of interesting places. You get to see poorer places, wealthy places, see how other people live. And not only that, you just get to meet people from everywhere, people who are in the military, um, from all walks of life. I mean, it is a melting pot. It can be probably, although I've never been to jail, it can be a little lot like jail where I guess people kind of stick together according to race. And, during my time, a lot of it was, they'd have to say, you get a lot of Filipino sailors, and you'd always have to have announcements of, hey, it's a U.S. ship, speak English, not Tagalog. So, but yeah, people would kind of click up that way. But you know, I've always gotten along with everybody, no matter their color, no matter their race, no matter their background. It's just always been my thing. Um, whether people were preppy, scrubby, whatever, I just try to treat everybody equal. Yeah, I think everybody should kind of do it. It's a good taste of discipline, and you get out, you get to travel, you're paid, everything's taken care of. You know where you're going to eat, you know where you're going to um, sleep. Your pay is going to come in every 2 weeks, but health insurance, all the other stuff that can be challenging as a young person, all the things you don't know you need are kind of laid out there for you. And again, that's why I said I was probably drawn to it, because I was very structured, very or regimented, and knew at that time kind of what I wanted to do, but we'll go further into that in the life story. But yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed it. And um, yeah, there are some other challenging times, but you learn a lot about sucking it up. You learn a lot about what you need versus what you don't need. Like I said, my brother-in-law, shout out to Christian, who is also a Marine Corps veteran, and happy birthday to the Marine Corps today. Um, all you crayon eaters, all you Department of the Navy crayon eating people. Um, yeah, we would pack less stuff for a 2 month deployment than our wives packed for us to go to Disney or on vacation. Even when we went to South Padre this summer, still packed a lot. But we don't need much, the basics. But yeah, it teaches you kind of like how to be focused, how to be out there with nothing but what you need, and all the other stuff goes to the wayside, and how to stay up and how to be responsible. How to, when you're standing a watch once a week at least, you're probably going to be up 24 hours, or, have a 3 hour night of sleep. And I think that's good practice. I'm not saying it's, ideal that people should go out running on 3 hours of sleep, but, there's a lot of jobs, a lot of situations out there in life that sometimes require that. And I think it takes a certain kind of person who's going to push through it and just say, well, I'm tired, but I can still do it tired. I'm still going to give 100% versus there are some people that if they don't have sleep, all they want to do is sleep, and that's all they can think of. And they just push everything else to the side as it relates to getting a task done or accomplishing a mission. Where I'm the opposite is once the tasks are done, once the mission is accomplished, then I can rest. Because if I know there's shit still to be done, my mind won't rest. So it doesn't matter how tired my body is. If my mind won't rest, then I don't rest. Yeah, I think there was some hugely valuable things that I learned. Um, I think a lot of people would benefit from a couple of years, like a little transition period, and get to see some things, learn how to be around other people, other cultures, other places, see other places, especially if you're from a small town like I was and you're not exposed. But of course, who knows? In the time of the internet and interwebs, I used to have to carry a road atlas in my car traveling between places, you know. So the new generations, I don't know what their experience is like, but other than challenging as um, I know the military is having recruitment problems, just didn't seem to be the same level of patriotism of back in the 80s and 90s. And, I'm sure there was some in the 2000s too, after 9/11. But, a lot of the podcasts I listen to, Mike Drop, Cleared Hot, Sean Ryan Show, they talk about there were periods, I guess maybe in the mid, like 2014s to on up, that, the quality of people going into the military was not great. Um, People were doing, smoking weed, doing different things, and, maybe not getting tested. I guess they tolerated a lot because there weren't enough people, or, I don't know. What you permit, you promote. So, Yeah, somewhere from what I understand of the new culture of the military is versus the old, it's just kind of gotten lost. But hopefully all that will get straightened out. Because the military, it needs people that are idealist and about something bigger than themselves. People who want to serve and actually be there. And the other sad part is there's so many people who disqualify for service because they're overweight and out of shape, mental problems, medical problems. Um, yeah, a little bit of a sad state of affairs right now. However, maybe with a change of election, regardless of how you feel about the person, maybe the country, the world's ready for a change, and maybe people will get that sense of patriotism back because I think it's lacking. I mean, I don't think it's lacking from the people that I know in my circle, but what I can see in the rest of the world is a lot of entitlement, and people don't understand how blessed you are to either be born or grow up in the United States or even be here, and that you could do your part, your selfless part, because freedom is not free. There are a lot of kids without parents lost to the war, um, mothers, fathers without a son or daughter, spouses who are widowed. Yeah, it's not free. So remember that when you do such simple things as go through a drive-through, go into a grocery store and pick out what you want to eat versus having to wait in a line and be rationed out only what you're going to eat. That we can sleep at night without having to worry about missiles flying over our borders. Might have to worry about some illegal aliens coming across, but maybe that'll stop soon too. Yeah. But there's a lot we don't have to worry about because there's people out there making the sacrifice every day. And there's been people for years who have raised their hand and made that sacrifice every day. And they've come back, some not at all, or come back life changed forever for them and everyone around them. So just keep that in mind when you're out there enjoying your freedoms. Or next time you have something to say about the state of this country or how bad it is, then go somewhere else if it's so bad. Chances are you've never really seen bad or what real poverty looks like. But yeah, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So unless you're going to participate, do something about it, figure out a way to make it better, do your part, raise your hand, then don't bitch about it. Just move on. But enough about that. I'm going to wrap this up. Again, thank everyone for their service, all you veterans out there, for whatever reason you did it, for whatever you sacrificed. I'm certainly enjoying my freedoms, my peace of sleep, being able to enjoy my family. And, you know, I'm out here trying to give back by giving one of our 97-year-old veterans a chance that nobody else would give him to be independent, to have some dignity and self respect of his independence, and not just be in a nursing home. So regardless of how challenging it is or what lessons I get to learn each week, I'm grateful that I get to do this for him. So all you guys out there, all you ladies, all you listeners, supporters, until next time, which will be Wednesday, part of my story, go out and be the person that you'd want to meet.
Asteroid of fear.